Everyone, welcome to Inside Out. Let us know if this is your first time. This is like our third or fourth time running this, and we really love doing it. So if you've been here before, let us know. Let us know if it's your first time as well. Inside Out is all about gathering people from different perspectives across product management, design, and research. And sometimes we talk strategy, sometimes we talk big ideas, sometimes we talk tactics. And today you're lucky enough that we'll be doing all three. I'm joined by our wonderful partners, Notion. Shout out if you're a fan of Notion. I know we definitely are. We've got two product experts, one from Dovetail, Noah, as you can see here, who's going to help us out understanding some of the tactical elements that Dovetail can help with. We've also got Kaho from Notion. And Kaho is joined also by her colleagues, Asahi, Masi, and Kazuki. So we're really, really lucky to have them here to help us talk a lot of things Notion, and we've got our product experts from Dovetail as well. The star of the show, however, is Bret. Bret is the superstar researcher from Notion. As I mentioned before, recently got back from Mexico and is now doing a webinar with us to talk about influential insights and all the things that she's learned across her career and working at Notion about how to craft amazing influential insights, how to distribute them effectively, and also how to drive and foster a culture of research at your organization. I've had some good chats with Bret in the past, so I know you're all in for a massive treat. It's going to be a really fun time, a really fun ride. We're going to start off with the strategy section, and then we're going to get down and we're going to talk some tactics with Noah and Kaho. Just to get started, Bret, I want to talk about a recent article by Judd Anton, and perhaps people in chat have read this before, and if you haven't, I will drop a link to it. Effectively, Judd is a former Airbnb researcher, and he argues that researchers have been doing the wrong research. So when we're talking about influential insights, I think it's important that we start off by just talking about whether or not we're even focusing on the right areas to begin with, because in order to really be influential, in order to have your insights be actionable, they have to be relevant to the business, they have to be relevant to the stakeholders, and Judd argues that perhaps researchers have been getting this wrong. So he identifies three major categories of research that you can do. So macro research, which is strategic in nature, foundational, and often answers big sort of unknown business questions. There's middle range research, which is focused on user understanding and product development, and then micro research, which is more evaluative and about sort of eye tracking and all that really technical evaluative research. Judd's argument is that we've been spending too much time on the middle range, which does not have enough business value. So I wanted to know, Bret, what are your thoughts on this?
Directionally, I'm largely in agreement with Judd Anton. I think for me, this manifests a lot when I'm thinking about planning and prioritization. So when I'm looking at, hey, here's the research that I'm going to be doing over the course of like a 6-month period, I want to be certain, first off, that macro research is happening, because that's how researchers are influencing the direction of the business, et cetera. So that's first priority. That has to happen. It also, I think, is a larger effort, of course, because these projects tend to be big. They're high visibility, you need buy-in, et cetera. And then after that's kind of locked in and I have a sense on, okay, here's my macro research project for the half, then I start thinking about the micro research, the evaluative, the really tactical stuff. And so that's the second priority. And that's usually tied to things that are on the roadmap that we know that are shipping, that type of thing. Like, what do we need to know before we ship XYZ feature? And then the third thing is that middle range of research. And so oftentimes I view that as like, they're sometimes necessary research studies that we need to do. Oftentimes it's a bit of like stakeholder management, like a product manager needs just like a little bit of information for a decision that they're making or that type of thing. But generally those are falling into like, this is the third priority of things that I would look at when planning research.
Yeah, in the article, Judd argues that this is also kind of the research that a lot of product managers or designers or even executives ask for. And like, I'm wondering, in like your experience, is this true? Like, is it that sort of middle of the road, questions about like how do users feel about X, or like what do they prefer? Like, is this sort of something that you have had a lot of requests for in the past?
Yeah, we definitely get requests for this. I think that there's probably a little bit more emphasis at Notion on that really evaluative. People really want to see like the nitty gritty. How do users actually interact with this type of thing? And I think it's most meaningful, honestly, to the team that builds these features. They want to see exactly what's happening. I would say that we definitely get the middle range research requests, but we get a lot of that like really evaluative, really tactical stuff. And then of course we have to like wedge in the macro research. We have to be like, this is really important. We have to do this, even if it won't influence things ultimately for like, another year or that type of thing. We need to do this and get this into people's minds now.
Yeah, what would be, I mean, I know there's a lot of researchers out there who, and strategic research has obviously been like a massive sort of like a lot of researchers are calling for it. A lot of like thought leaders, like a lot of people like Jared Spool are really advocating hard for like more and more of the strategic and foundational research. I think we were talking yesterday about how in order to like your relationship with other research departments and particularly with like data science. And I thought that actually was interesting to me because I think a lot of these sort of foundational and large organization-wide research projects would probably benefit from closer collaboration between different research departments. What's your insight in this?
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate at Notion to have a super tight relationship with my data science partner, and then also working on a lot of things with business development as well. And so business development will have an insight into, like, here are third-party project or products that people are using, et cetera. But anyway, going back to the data science relationship, data science and research at Notion kind of have an interplay where we're looking at research planning for a quarter or that type of thing. And we're usually trying to lay out the research endeavors that we do in sort of a sequential manner. So for instance, I'll do some qualitative research and I'll notice like, hey, there's some themes in here that I would love my data science partner to check out and like think about and that type of thing. And then if she can, of course, she'll go in and do that. And but that will also work vice versa. So sometimes she might do the deep dive and she'll see some stuff and she'll be like, Bret, can you look into this if you can during the qualitative research that you're going to do? So we try to sequence research a little bit like that. We also, this is like kind of a new thing. We've been producing research reports that basically take the qualitative and the quantitative and then put them together into the same document. And honestly, I think that's been huge for impact and for stakeholders to really like get the gist of things really quick, because if you see a theme and you're like, okay, here's the qualitative, here's people talking about it, and then also here's how widespread it is, here's like the raw numbers, etc., that like really drives it home that, oh, this is something that we need to pay attention to, this is something that we need to take action on. So it's been quite lovely, I think, at Notion to have that interplay between data science and research, generally working together on similar things but from opposite viewpoints.
Yeah, I think that sort of qual v quant, one is definitely not better than the other. And like, besides the fact that they really do have completely, like they can reveal very different things about your users and give very different insights. I also think that like, different stakeholders certainly respond to different kinds of data sets more intuitively. Some people are just more numerical and they like to see that sort of quantitative. They have much more trust in numbers. I feel like in the tech industry, we have that culture of like trusting numbers. And more and more we're moving into like qualitative spaces, which is great, and having more and more trust in qualitative data as well. But having them both there, I think, gives people a nice entry point and a way to like kind of interpret the data through one lens, and then lends itself to more sympathy for that other lens. And I think if you have that complete picture, it can really be a very powerful thing when it comes to influencing with insights. I just want to mention really quickly to the audience, everybody out there, if you do hear something that you like, we can't really see you, so it would be awesome if you hit that little button down here, so one of the reacts, and you can give us a clap or a heart or all of that. Let us know, let Bret know when you agree with what she's saying, if you think it's, or if you disagree with what she's saying. I don't think there's a disagree reaction, but we'll be creative. From that like high level of like what kind of research should researchers be doing, we can kind of move down a level now. And once we agree, okay, we're focusing on the right areas, how do we plan research in a way that ensures that it's relevant to the product team. So, this can take a lot of different, there's a lot of moving parts to this. But, how do you work with your stakeholders, and how do you manage your research requests? How do you triage them? And how do you really find those big questions that are worth answering? Like what are your tips for like planning research in a way that makes it effective?
Yes. Okay. So I think the first thing is having one-on-ones on some sort of cadence with your stakeholders. And during those one-on-ones, just getting a sense for, hey, what are the decisions that you are about to make where we don't have any research, we don't have any data, we have like, kind of a blind spot. And I think that understanding those decisions, understanding like, okay, what's the magnitude of this decision? Is this something that feels reversible? It's like, we could go and make that decision, and the consequences either way wouldn't be too terrible. Or is this a decision that's like really heavy, and if we, decide to go one way or the other way, this is going to like, have a huge effect on the business, on, engineering hours, whatever. So I think, yeah, it's the first thing, make sure that you're having those one-on-ones with your stakeholders and just understanding and empathizing with what are the decisions that they're making. And then also, where do we feel like we have blind spots? Then the other thing that I do for planning, I gather all my stakeholders together. It's not, I think in other organizations, they've been very rigorous about this and have done this, on a specific cadence. So at Notion, it's a little bit ad hoc at this point. But I gather all of my stakeholders together. And the first thing we do is we get out all the questions that they have. And generally we do this in kind of like a loose free form tool, a FigJam, a Miro, that type of thing. So everyone can create all those sticky notes and we can kind of group things and that type of thing. But I really want them, because I think coming up with research questions is sometimes a little bit hard for stakeholders, but I really want them to just express what's the question that you have, and then how is answering that question going to help you make a decision. So we can always tie it back to what's the decision you're trying to make with this research. So we get all those questions out, we start grouping things, like, hey, where are the themes, that type of thing. And then after that, honestly, it helps really to have all those stakeholders in a room together, because you can go through everything and have people really advocate for the things, the research that they want to see done. And we can have very concrete conversations about what are the trade-offs. If we do this research right now, what does that mean for the other types of, or the other research questions that are in the queue and that type of thing. So it's quite helpful, yes, to have them all together. Kind of, it sounds intense, but like, a little bit of a Thunderdome. Like, let's just have these candid conversations right now to make sure that we're doing the most impactful research. And oftentimes, I think design has a perspective, engineering has a perspective. We also have product management, or of course, product management in there. And then our PMMs and our data science folks in there too. And everyone has a little bit of a different angle on the research that they think is most impactful. But I think generally out of these conversations, we can figure out, okay, what is the one thing that we can all agree on we need to do next? So that's how I go about like the research planning and like managing all those stakeholders, just to figure out like what's the most important stuff that we need to be doing research on.
Is there any specific sort of frameworks that you use, or you said it's like a sort of Thunderdome-esque free-for-all, which I love the image of a bunch of product people in a kind of Mad Max world figuring out what research questions they're going to answer next and how they're going to build the next greatest feature, particularly with Notion. Do you use like a sort of, matrix with sort of risk and all that sort of stuff, or is it really like just out loud and like you kind of talk it through?
Yeah, we're pretty much out loud and we talk it through. We're not super rigorous. I've been in organizations where we try to like plot everything on a matrix and we try to figure out like what's the risk involved with everything. At this point, it's pretty, let's just talk it out. And I think, one of Notion's values is being kind and direct. And so people are pretty like, hey, this is why I think this is important. And they're very comfortable with directly saying that sort of thing. I think in other organizations, that might be a little bit harder to get people to, blurt out the truth. But so far at Notion, it hasn't been super difficult to have that conversation.
I really love that. It reminds me a little bit of Teresa Torres's idea of getting all your stakeholders in the room to kind of map out what they think the experience looks like and figure out where those gaps might be, and then kind of testing that framework, testing people's understanding of the user. I also love that you're even getting like, people from across the organization, people from like PMM and all that, like, because everybody has like a different point of view that they can really offer when it comes to the user. And I think that's kind of understated a little bit. Actually, there's a really great report I'm going to drop in chat by Stripe Partners for the audience out there. It's called the New Research Playbook, and it kind of covers a little bit of this about everyone has a kind of perspective to offer around the user and how maybe you can, leverage those perspectives. So so we've talked about like, okay, are we doing the right kind of research? Once we agree on that, are we planning research with our product team? So you've got this really great collaborative motion, which I love to hear. And I think, the kind of, it avoids the sort of cliche that researchers work in silos. So it's awesome to hear like this cross-collaborative, sort of cross-functional collaborative motion going. Now, when it comes to the actual like creation of insights, because if we're talking about influencing with insights, it's planning right from the top all the way down to the actual creation of that artifact, whether it be, a presentation that you deliver, like a PDF, or like, in Dovetail, like a sort of atomic insight. So I'm just wondering, like, to get a bit tactical, what are some of the sort of tips or ideas that you use? I mean, we've talked about quant and qual, but you use to make those insights more engaging and, like share some insight about like some of your processes in that area.
Yes, of course. Okay, so setting context, many of you have used Notion. It's extremely doc-centric. We don't have really like a slides or index sort of mode. And so the way that this manifests in research is all of our research is in long documents. And that's actually what you present out. So I think in other organizations, you might have like one document that you write and that has like all the deep nitty-gritty details. And then you would actually present out of a deck, which has like, bullet points and that type of thing. For us, it's all in one. And so it's a little bit tricky. It creates its own, challenges and opportunities and that sort of thing. So essentially what we do when we're creating this deck is, this doc, we try to really make sure, again, going with that like kind and direct value, the headlines are just like super, super simple. Just like, hey, this is Sesame Street level. Everyone can understand this, that type of thing. We also try to make them a little bit like slogan-y sometimes, or just like, hey, if it has like two halves, like we try to make it so it's like balanced and just like it's memorable in some sort of way. So that's a little bit about how we go about creating the doc. Headlines, like here's just the like pure nugget of information. And then of course we go in, Notion is very intense about citing everything. So we have all that nitty gritty detail in there. One thing, and this is going to make me sound like a huge Dovetail fangirl, but that's okay because I am. We use Dovetail highlight reels a ton, and we just embed those into our Notion docs. And honestly, I think the culture at Notion is extremely doc heavy. Everyone's reading docs all the time, and it's tiring. It's really tiring. Like cognitively, it's a lot. And so when we put in those Dovetail highlight reels, it's like a relief. People are so excited to be intaking information in a way that's not just reading words on a page. And so we drop those highlight reels in there. And honestly, like some of our stakeholders have been like, hey, it feels like research is on TikTok because I could just like consume your entire report by just watching these clips. And it's just like super fast and I don't have to like read and focus super deeply. So that's a little bit about, I think, like the crafting of the insights. And then of course we work on, okay, what are like the, 3 bullet points that I would want to put into a Slack post because executives are going to see that and that type of thing. So just figuring out like, okay, how do I get down from this super long doc into 3 bullet points and then a video clip that's going to go on Slack and, be shared throughout the company and that type of thing. The other thing too about crafting insights that we've been recently working on quite a lot too is insights across the research team. So not only are we working with, our research and data science, like that sort of union, but also within the research team. So recently, there were 3 researchers who had kind of worked on like a similar topic and that type of thing. And so we really wanted to put all of those insights together into one document. And so we kind of took insights from our individual docs and, made those portable and then put them into one like supersize. Here's everything that we know about this topic from these 3 different researchers. So that's a little bit about the tactical, like, how to craft the insight.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to recap the 3 tips, punchy headlines that grab people's attention, that are memorable, like a little bit of marketing influence there, because like you probably have to repeat these a lot of times for them to sink in. So it makes it easier if it kind of rolls off the tongue, right? And then you've got, use audio visual elements, when people can see other faces, when they can hear the voice or the pain in the user's voice, they're much more likely to act on it. So there's that sort of empathy driving element. And you've got this idea as well of like different messages for different audiences, which I think again is something that comes, is very strong in the marketing, but perhaps a lot of user researchers, don't consider like who their actual audience is. So like, talking to executives, is really different to talking to like other researchers, for example, or product managers or whomever. Really, you need to really tailor your message to the audience. And then finally, this inter functional research efforts where you can combine different research findings together across different projects, perhaps, and make them all the more impactful because they're all like kind of related in ways that perhaps people don't see yet. So amazing tips. We're going to move on to the next stage. So we've picked the right research, we've planned it correctly, we've done this sort of great cross-functional effort to get the right questions to the right people. Now we've created this amazing insights. We've got a great report that we want to share with everybody. Let's talk about how we actually ensure that those insights are distributed effectively across the organization. So getting them to the right people at the right time is so important. Can you give us a little tips about how you work with your stakeholders to ensure that they're actually, your insights are actually having the impact that they should be having after all that hard work?
Yes. So Notion's fairly traditional in that we do, the hour-long research readout and that type of thing. We do a little bit of the Amazon as well. Like, hey, if you're coming to the readout, here's 10 minutes to read the actual document and add questions and that type of thing. I would say after that readout, our readouts tend to be pretty interactive. There's a lot of people who are like, wait, I have more questions. Like, can we dive into this and that type of thing? So generally I'll plan maybe 40 minutes of me talking and I'll know that I'm going to be interrupted a lot. And we're going to have like all of these kind of like segues and that type of thing. So I think encouraging that too, like you really want people to ask questions. It's so boring if I'm just, reading to you all for an hour. So that's one thing. And then I think after this, I'm quite spoiled right now because my product manager is phenomenal. But after doing the readout, the next day she will create a Slack post. And in that Slack post, she has action items and she'll say, okay, engineering, here's the stuff you need to do. Okay, designers, here's the stuff you need to do. And then also we will generally have here's the action items. And then, hey, here's stuff that we need to think about. It's not like there's an immediate thing that we need to do at this point, but it's like, this is going to influence how we think about things like planning, et cetera, for the upcoming quarter or that type of thing. We just don't know quite enough, or we haven't like let it marinate enough to know what we need to do. So those are, I guess, some thoughts on, distributing those insights.
I'd love to hear about that relationship with your product manager. Shout out from the audience if you are a researcher and you have an amazing product manager that you work with. And if you are a product manager, shout out if you have a great user researcher that you work with. Sometimes there's a bit of tension in those relationships. So it's lovely to, maybe spread the love a little bit more than we're used to. There you go. There's a lot of love. So you were saying that your product manager, is really good at actioning and sort of directing the flow of work after those insights have come in. I remember we were talking briefly before this webinar, but about recommendations, because I think recommendations is something that a lot of researchers, perhaps from like academic backgrounds, they're like, oh, well, it's really not my job to tell the product team what to build or what to do or how to like deal with these insights. It's my job to kind of give them the information and show them what the customers are thinking and saying. What are your opinions on recos?
My hot take is I think researchers should absolutely be writing recommendations. I think it's super important that we do this. My perspective on this, I think like I used to earlier on in my career feel like a little bit embarrassed or a little bit like, how am I important enough to be able to say anything about like what we should be doing and that type of thing. And that turned around for me recently where one person told me like, hey, and this is also unique to Notion. Notion is pre-IPO. All this decisions that we're making right now are ultimately going to influence how valuable Notion is as a company. The stock price, whatever, all the money, blah blah blah. But we as researchers have a unique perspective. We have this like unique relationship with our customers, all this knowledge that they're sharing with us, and we should be sharing that. We should be like saying, hey, I know all this stuff about our customers and this is what we should do. And when I write recommendations, I don't necessarily think like verbatim, this is exactly what we should build or, like the way we should design things or anything like that. It's really intended as a, starting point. Like, hey, here's what I think we should do, but I know that we're going to go through a ton of iteration. There's going to be a lot more data that gets added to this, all of that type of thing. And the other thing on recommendations too is I will generally write them in 2 sections. I will write them in the like, these are the action items that we need to do now. Like if there's a bug, we need to fix this. If this is just like hugely problematic for our users, this is what we need to do. But then there's another section where I will say like, these are things that we need to think about before the next quarterly planning or that type of thing. And so, yeah, I'll split the recommendations into those 2 buckets, just to make sure, because I think sometimes that like long-term stuff can get a little lost. You can just get caught in the flurry of like, do this, take action. And sometimes we're not always doing that forward thinking that we need to be doing. So I will note that in the report, like, let's start thinking about this. But yeah.
I mean, that like, the 2 types of recommendation, I mean, hanging on to those recommendations that you know it is going to be so important for long-term planning. Like I wish on my team I had my marketing team, I had a user researcher, because I know there's a lot of good stuff that comes up, and sometimes it just gets lost in the fray, and it's really, really valuable when you're coming around and be like, oh, what are those things we need to focus on? It's like, we've got it all. We've got the customer highlights here. We got the backing, the evidence for what we should be doing and why we should be doing it. So that is so useful. So I want to get into, as a sort of final point for both of us, into this idea of like creating a research culture, because I think one of the biggest problems, or one of the issues, one of the blockers to actually having, researchers having the impact that they really want, is that there just isn't a culture around consuming insights or going to researchers to get those, to get the understanding of the customer that they need to make decisions. Perhaps there's like trust issues, perhaps, who knows, there's a whole host of things that can really work against a really great user researcher being as impactful as they possibly could be. And so we get onto this idea of how do we foster a culture where people really, really are like hungry for more research, where they're seeking it out, and where they wouldn't make tough decisions without it. So there's obviously a lot of ways you can do this. I want to hear maybe some of your thoughts on things like democratization or exposure hours, or any of the other like, tactical or, trending ideas about how people can really bring stakeholders together to really trust research.
Yes. Okay. So a few things. I love Jared Spool's concept of exposure hours. For all of the research that I do, I invite the entire team to come along and watch. And there's actually generally a pretty good culture of, like 10 people will be watching a session that, I have with a customer and that type of thing. And they will have a Slack thread where it's like, they're live reacting to everything that's going on. And so I'll go back and read it and be like a little bit mortified, because I'll be like, oh God, I said something, silly or whatever. But I think the exposure hour is a huge thing. The democratization of research, this is the most research answer ever, but I'm going to tell you, like, it depends. I think that there are certain scenarios in which it works quite well when, for instance, you have colleagues who are very comfortable interfacing with customers, and they can follow kind of like, here's a templated interview guide and that type of thing. And then, the insights that they create are noted as like, this may not have followed like a specific methodology, like quite so rigorously or that type of thing. But I think all of that, like that democratization and just like generally, non-researchers speaking to customers and to users, that's quite valuable, and it still adds to the body of things that we know about our users. So I'm not against research democratization. I just think there's like a very specific scenarios in which that functions quite well. And then the last thing I think on like the creating the research culture, Notion has a very intense culture of like, if you are going to make a claim, you have to cite data for it. And so I think that's quite valuable, because then, like you always have to have some sort of data to, support what you're saying. And that means that you have to have data science in there. You have to have research in there. You have to have some rationale for like why you're saying what you're saying. And so that is quite useful. And then the last thing that I'll say is, I think just like the combination of research insights with other types of data is like, it's jet fuel. It makes things just like so easy to understand, and people just want more of it. So like the combination of research and data science, that was killer. We're going to be doing that all the time, I think, in future, because people really understand that. And the other thing I think is when researchers are combining their insights too. So when we have like, oh yeah, here's this perspective on this concept that's coming from 3 different researchers, and we add that all together, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I really understand this, and I understand how like huge the pain point is, or that type of thing. So some thoughts on I think the research culture.
Incredible, really, really good tips there. I love the idea of bringing quant and qual together, like breaking down those silos. There's not user research, so there's quant, there's data science, there's all these people. I mean, really, it's all about understanding the customer, bringing them all together is so impactful. I'm really interested to hear of the sort of hardcore empiricism that's going on over at Notion and I mean, you heard it here first, folks. This is why this is one of the fastest growing scale ups, one of the most successful organizations around these days, really. So like so many people, like I know internally at Dovetail, we always look at Notion as just one of those success stories. So it's founded on facts and really good quality data coming from both qual and quant. So something to take home to your own organizations. If you find there's a little bit of resistance to that, say that Notion does it and look at them. So we are going to get around to some of the questions that all of you folks have asked Bret. But first, we're just going to go from like this sort of strategy that we've just discussed. First of all, actually, can we all just give a round of applause for Bret? Because we're going to wrap up the interview with her right now. So everyone, please, like really insightful. Thank you so much, Bret. It was absolutely incredible. There you go. Lots of love from the audience there. Because we're going to be moving on from the sort of strategy ideas and we're going to go down a level into tactics. And we're going to be thinking about, there's obviously a number of ways that you can go about crafting a research culture and making influential insights. And we've covered like a lot of these things with Bret. We're now going to move into like how you can do this tactically with tools like Dovetail. So I was going to bring Noah on, our product expert from Dovetail. G'day, Noah. How are you going?
Going well. How about yourself, Sean?
Yeah, I'm good. So Noah, we've discussed all these like high-level, theoretical, strategic ideas. So now let's talk tactics. So obviously, there's a lot of ways you can make an insight more actionable. Do you want to show us some ways that you can use a tool like Dovetail to help make those insights just more appealing, more grabby, more engaging for stakeholders?
Yeah, happy to do so. Let me share my screen up here quickly. As a person who does research, I think I saw a comment in the chat earlier from Vanessa saying you can't say something isn't true if you have a video or someone saying it. So I think me personally, I work in sales and I find myself finding these nice nuggets to pass along to product teams, engineering team, our design team that can really help them in their day-to-day and things that they're building. And so in Dovetail, jumping into like a qualitative project and just jumping into maybe a finished interview or a sales call, an example that I've had, I find it very easy to create what's called a highlight reel. And to do so in Dovetail, I saw many questions around this. You can simply highlight a piece of text. Perhaps I can title this login issues, and that's what I'm capturing for, the engineering team who may not know that this is going on with our customer base. And perhaps I could tag that a couple of times. And what's beautiful about Dovetail is it actually allows you to kind of avoid going into, Final Cut, maybe Adobe, some of those video editing programs, and leverage a highlight reel out of Dovetail based on what you've highlighted and based on what you've deemed as important for your specific stakeholder. In my case, the engineering team. So I can rearrange this, really build this out with different highlights. But most importantly, I think I can get this to my engineering team very seamlessly and easily by just copying a link to this highlight. And I did see a question about this earlier about integrating this into Slack, Notion. It's going to be the same. Notion is to come, but just want to show you how you can really just switch over. I have a conversation going here with Sean. He's looking for some nitty-gritty insights, and I have one for him in this highlight reel. So dropping this highlight reel actually allows me to meet Sean where he is in the tools that he's working in. Perhaps Sean, lives in Slack. So now Sean has the ability to play this video in Slack, dive into that highlight of the moments of people having issues logging in. And now Sean's able to make actionable decisions right away with me as a person who does research, getting him that insight in less than 2-3 minutes after my call and getting that information here into Dovetail. I think what's really optimal about this process is even taking a step back. If we wanted to get a bit meatier with things, you can create a full Dovetail insight. And when creating a full Dovetail insight, you can actually drop in what's called a reel, or we like to call it Reel 2.0 here at Dovetail, because broadening in on that actual highlight reel, I can actually start pulling highlights from across my organization. So perhaps I'm partnering with my customer success managers. They're hearing login issues. I'm hearing login issues. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a highlight from perhaps my video, and then I can take a highlight from perhaps like the customer success manager and say, hey, they're also hearing this. So now I'm really iterating on what I'm hearing in login issues. And again, I'm not an academic researcher. That's Bret. I am in sales. So again, deeming the title person that does research, I find it very easy to just put in some information here, maybe title this as login issues. And now I can publish this, and very similar to what I just did sharing with Sean, that highlight reel, I can capture that link here and then drop this public link here into Slack, where Sean can now dive into that insight and dig a bit more deeper into what's going on with these login issues. So really cool in terms of seamlessly integrating and meeting your customers and your stakeholders where they are. That's going to be a primary key feature in Dovetail, that highlight reel, allowing you to leverage that and do so.
Amazing. You mentioned that I live in Slack, and it is true, folks. I do live in Slack. Now, we're talking also about like fostering a research culture with Bret, and it's like one of these huge gargantuan tasks that a lot of people do try to take on, and it involves a lot of, organizational politicking, and, it's a big task. But, there are ways that you can kind of use tools like Dovetail to help, creating a single source where people know where to go, where your stakeholders know where to go, and how to and to navigate and find the insights that they need to make decisions, can bring you a long way into actually getting that culture off the ground. Noah, can you show us your homepage, for example? Because I think that's a really instructive example of like how you can really use a tool like Dovetail to help foster culture around research.
Yeah, happy to dive in, Sean. Actually, one of our premium features is, as Sean just alluded to, the homepage. So the homepage we see at Dovetail here is really kind of a landing page for your stakeholders, depending on what they're interested in, what they're looking to dive into. So this is a completely customizable page. As you can see, this is Noah's repository. Welcome to Noah's world, where we play and learn. But deep down, you can dive into different aspects of like maybe research initiatives. You can dive into what the research is doing. The research team is doing maybe some market research, some competitor analysis. You can also dive into perhaps what the product team is doing very quickly. And these are just projects that I've had posted front of mind, top of mind for our organization, so people can get to these quickly. I think what's really impactful and what's important, you can also just have feeds, maybe here on the homepage, demonstrating what's the latest insights from across the team. And look at here, we have login issues right top center. So people logging in can notice that, hey, there's a new insight posted around login issues that's flat on our homepage. And so again, this landing page is really to get people to information that they're interested in quickly. And I think the way you can really leverage that is these feeds. You can see here I have feeds set up for like perhaps my leadership team. I have like the most popular, voice of the customer tags being utilized. Perhaps we have monthly newsletters that we post in our organization. So you want to kind of dive in. If you've missed one, you've been out of office. But I think it's really cool to just have like the highlights too as well. Maybe the product team is doing interviews or the research team is doing interviews. A cool feature of Dovetail, talking in tools and integration, is having the ability to actually follow a feed. And by doing so in Dovetail, you can link this with Slack or Microsoft Teams, set how often you want to actually be notified by those feeds. So very Pinterest-like in this way. Hopefully we have a few Pinterest fans here in the chat, but you can really dictate how often you want to be notified and indicated based on what you're following. So here in Slack, if I were to jump back over to my Slack, you can see here my Dovetail integration that earlier this week, last week, I got notified that there were 4 new updates based on a feed that I was following, and clicking into that takes me directly to that feed and tells me like, oh, what's new in terms of the customer success team and what they're working on. So really cool and impactful way of just driving stakeholder curation based on their experience using the homepage.
Yes, amazing. And I see here we're looking at a feature that's just on the horizon, folks. And I think a lot of people in enterprise or in a large organization can be really happy about this, because one massive blocker to being able to distribute your insights effectively is the protection of PII. Obviously, research is working a lot with information that they can't exactly spread far and wide. So Noah, do you want to run everyone through how we're going to fix this?
Yeah. I hear this a lot actually from my customers, just like, hey, I can't even internally share, highlight reels or information across the organization because of, PII and certain things that we're bound to. And so Dovetail actually is working on a feature currently called obfuscation, which allows you to actually go through, create highlight reels, but obfuscate personal identifiable information from your specific interviews or the research that you're conducting. And so more to come on this. Really just wanted to kind of preview this, but please feel free to reach out to us, ask questions. But this is going to be a huge feature for, researchers that may, have, a fine line in terms of the PII they can share with their customer and their stakeholders. So please feel free to contact us. I'm happy. Our sales team is happy to really talk to you and walk you through what our plans are for this and how this can really help you impact sending those insights out.
Thanks for that, Noah. We've also got our lovely guest Kaho on from Tokyo, from Notion Tokyo. So we've also got this great relationship that we've got with Notion at the moment, and Notion's all about bringing teams closer together, and Dovetail's all about bringing teams closer to the customer. So it's a relationship founded on closeness, which is a good premise for any relationship in my books. Kaho, we know that Notion is built to bring teams closer together, and researchers often have problems working in silos. So I was wondering if you can show us some ways that researchers and people who do research, like product managers and designers, can use Notion to organize their work in a central location where everything is connected and accessible to the rest of their team and stakeholders.
Yeah, of course. Hi, this is Kaho from Notion, and I'm excited to walk you through a demo for how researchers and people who do research could use Notion. So I understand that you guys often work in silos, which make it hard to be productive because all your contents are spread everywhere. On this page, we have centralized 3 data resources: research documents, research participant, and interview, all within one connected workspace. And this ensures that all your data is in one place, easily accessible, and of course, well organized.
Awesome. So from a planning point of view, researchers are always, managing different participants, managing research projects, managing the documentation that goes along with that. How can Notion help researchers, really manage things better, particularly as they scale their operations?
Yeah, sure. So we have research documents here, and participants data here, and interview data here. And all of this are managed by our database. And the database looks like this. We have properties of participants' name, research doc, company name, role, and status. And if you want to add more properties, you can easily do so by clicking the plus button here, and you can add all of those properties. Once you created the database, you can also change the view with one click. For example, this is the board view of the status. You can also change the layout by just one click like this to gallery, timeline, list, calendar, and so on. And all of the users says that our database is very unique and powerful because it's designed with flexibility in mind to suit your unique needs.
Incredible. So much magic going on. Another problem that researchers often run into as they scale is this sort of idea of standardization and streamlining of processes. So I was wondering what Notion can do to help with that.
Yeah, so we got a perfect solution for this. When you need to create a new document for a user interview, you just need to hit the Create an Interview Assistant button here, and template will show up like this. This is a template that we built in advance. It is customizable. That means that you can pre-insert your company's standardized format like this one. And this way, you can prevent everyone from writing in different formats. And additionally, you can embed so many softwares like Jira, Slack with Notion through integration. And of course, Dovetail is one of them. So we can send the integration link in the chat so you can see who are our integration partners.
Incredible. Now, researchers need to communicate really quickly with their stakeholders to keep them in the loop and keep them updated with the insights that they're gathering with the different research projects that are going on. So it means they're doing a lot of writing. So I know that Notion has a lot of really hot AI features lately that could potentially help with some of that. Do you want to show them off?
Yeah, of course. So I understand that researchers spend a lot of time writing insights, but oftentimes they haven't been distributed effectively. And Notion AI can help with that. So after you finish conducting your interview, your note might look like this. And you have user's information here and transcript in the table here. With this information, Notion AI can generate interview snapshot at a single click. So those are pre-inserted AI buttons that generate the interview snapshot. I'm going to click the generate button and see how it works. Okay, so it reads the information in the page and creates a snapshot like this. And even after the information in the page get updated, you can just hit the update button here and we will regenerate updated information. So rather than spending hours of writing insights, Notion AI can simplify the process, allowing you to be more productive and allocate more time to other important tasks. And after you're creating the interview snapshot, you can share this page to the other teammates super easily by clicking the share button and add a person, or just simply mentioning the person in the comment.
Incredible. Now, this looks great, and I'm sure a lot of people in chat are wondering the same as me. This looks kind of complicated. I'm not a Notion expert. What can you do to help the mere mortals like ourselves to pull something like this up?
Yeah, of course. So you don't have to worry. Notion offers range of templates, and most of them are free to use. And this one I'm showing you now is created by our amazing SE Kazuki. And you can just say hi to everyone. Yeah, that's Kazuki, and that is available on our template gallery here. And it's of course free to use. We can share the template page in the chat, so you can start using it from today. Yeah, I hope this demo helped you to understand Notion better and hope you enjoyed it.
Incredible. That was awesome. So much sophisticated magic and template magic. Basically, there's no other way I can explain it. So really, really awesome job from you folks. Now we're going to get around to the questions with Bret. So I know a lot of you have asked some really great questions, and you've been very, very patient. So let's get onto them right now. So we're going to start. Bret, if you want to come back on to on stage with me here. So Bret's here. So from Anonymous, my company's UX maturity is really low, and many of the product managers think that they can do UX research by themselves, which often contains very biased questions and bad questions in general. How do you convince them to leave the UX research to the professional?
I think this is like a slow, you have to win them over very gradually. And I might start with, if you're seeing their, interview guides and that type of thing, I might leave feedback on it. I wouldn't just obliterate it and be like, get rid of everything, but maybe focus on 3 areas where you're like, okay, let's make this better. And meanwhile, you're trying to coach them into let's ask unbiased questions, et cetera. And you're also painting yourself as an expert because you are an expert in research. And you want them to gradually, of course, just be like, wow, this person knows a ton about research. I would be better off doing my product management stuff and leaving the research to you. But I think it is going to be a gradual process where, you have to show your knowledge and also, win them over and create that relationship with them. And then hopefully everything transitions kind of over to you. And it's not the worst too. If you can get them to a point where where they can actually answer some questions and they can do a bit of democratized research, that can be helpful for you as well. Of course, you don't want this world of biased or just bad questions. But if you can polish them to a point where they can do a little bit, that would be helpful.
Spicy one to start off with. I like that. So from Shreya, Bret, do you tend to tailor your research insights or presentations to different sets of stakeholders? It can be challenging to figure out what information to share and hold back to higher level execs when the nitty-gritty details may be what's really valuable. Any thoughts on this?
Yes, definitely. We tailor our insights to the audience. Often with the immediate team, we'll go into every single detail because they need to know all of the details for the decisions that they're going to be making. But I think every level higher, it becomes okay, what's for my manager, the thing that I might give her is a paragraph essentially, and then maybe two points on why this is important and what I need from her and that type of thing. And then once we get to the executives, it's here's one sentence, and then this is the so what. This is the thing that you should care about, the thing that we need to take action on, or that type of thing. I think there was also a second part of the question. I forgot.
It was, I think you covered it. It was about the sort of nitty-gritty details are important, but I think it's important to remember that go on. Go.
Yeah. So I think if the so what is compelling enough, the executive will drill down and you will end up telling the nitty-gritty details, but you might not want to lead with it. You have to give them just what's the thing that they need to do? What's the thing that they need to care about? And then, hope that, they're going to get into they're going to ask some questions and you're going to end up telling the nitty-gritty story anyway.
Absolutely. Amazing advice. So from Diane, for Bret, for these stakeholder meetings that you mentioned, I think we're talking about research planning earlier. How many stakeholders are involved typically in the Thunderdome?
Yeah, it would be so on the low end, it would be 6, and then the high end would be 12-ish. And it will vary. Sometimes, when I'm doing a big sort of planning where I'm like, okay, this is the quarter and we want to lay out what we're going to do for the quarter, it'll be one of the bigger ones. It'll be 12 people. I think managing the one-on-ones ahead of that too, so you don't end up surprised is key. Just getting a sense on like, hey, what are you going to be bringing to the Thunderdome next week? And asking your stakeholders a little bit ahead of time so that, you can head off any conflicts, or you see like, oh yeah, there's definite overlap in like what PMM and data science and product all want. Yeah.
Awesome. So from Brooke would love to hear more about how the designers and engineers are involved and how they're contributing at Notion.
Yes, designers and engineers are heavily involved in research, so they would be attending those stakeholder meetings. They're also watching almost everything. Sorry about that. I just have like something caught in my right throat. Yes, and then of course the action items afterward. So the designers and the engineers would, after the research is all together, they would have, hey, here are our next steps. Here's what we need to do from the design perspective. Here's what we need to do from engineering.
Okay, take a sec to clear the throat. I'll line up the next question. So from Anonymous, we've got a lot of tips and recommendations discussed so far seem to rely on having a high research maturity, so multiple researchers, access to tools, cross-team collaborations. Do you have any specific advice for solo researchers at low maturity companies who don't have a lot of tools or collaborative relationships across their orgs? So Bret, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've been the first researcher in 2 out of the 5 startups that I've worked at. And then at Notion, I was the second researcher. So there was like nothing when we got started. And I think the biggest thing when you come in and you're like the only person who knows anything about research is like really focusing on those relationships. And then also just having like a super high quality bar for all of the research that you do produce, because you have to sell people on research. Like a lot of people have never seen research before, don't really know what it is to interact with a researcher. And so you have to be doing this education. You also have to be producing like really good quality insights so that people are bought in and they're like, oh yeah, it's really valuable that, we have a researcher and I should come to this person for this type of work and that type of thing. So I think the relationships, and then also just like figuring out the processes too. Like I think sometimes I've come into an org and been like, okay, we're ready for this like really high fidelity, intense 12-step process. And it didn't go so well. Like I think we have to start very small when we're the only researcher, and just figure out like, okay, what's the scrappiest process that can actually get whatever I need to get done. So if planning is like, the thing that you need to get done, okay, who are the people who absolutely need to be in there? What's the least amount of time it can take? Like that type of thing. And then as far as the tool thing, I think the tool conversation is kind of hard. I think the budget conversations about like, hey, we do need incentives. It's just like a fact of research. Like you are going to have to get money for incentives. It's very difficult, I think, to do research without incentives. And then also like, okay, what are the scrappiest ways that you can use the tools, use like research tools and that type of thing? Or is there a way around using some of these things? Like we're still pretty scrappy as far as scheduling tools. We don't have like a fancy scheduling tool or that type of thing. But yeah, and also, I mean, Dovetail, like I've always been, that's been like one of the first tools that I advocate for when I go into or when I started a new organization. I'm like, yes, please get Dovetail in, and the pricing is generally like, sales people can talk about that more, but generally the pricing is quite friendly. So we've been quite happy with that. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say you don't necessarily need tools to get everywhere where you're going, but they can definitely help. And Dovetail has starter packages and things that can get you kind of off the ground for a pretty low price. It's quite affordable. So how do you craft this from Anonymous? How do you craft insights so they feel actionable to designers and engineers rather than overwhelming? Because sometimes reports can be full of problems and feel like it's just too much. So do you have any? I think this is a 2-part question. So what's your advice on not overwhelming people? We did talk a little bit about that before. Do you want to dive back in?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say like, okay, here's the like entire essay, here's all the nitty gritty details, etc. And then at the end, it's like, here are the recommendations, and there's your recommendations, and try to be like one sentence or, like max 3 recommendations, but like 1 sentence per recommendation, just really distill it down to like, this is exactly what needs to happen. And I think the recommendations are super important for comprehension too, because I think a lot of people will kind of like glaze over the insight, et cetera. But once they see the recommendation and they see like how concrete it is, then they're like, oh, okay, now I understand exactly like what the user pain point is and then how we're going to go about dealing with it. So that's what I would say. Just like keep those recommendations really short and succinct. And then, like eventually like the designer or the engineer who's working on it will have to go in and understand all of the details. But the takeaway for that is very short.
I wonder if the question is coming from a place of like researchers are just feeling like they're the bearer of bad news, doom and gloom, always coming with points and problems. And but I mean, like this is the territory. Solving customer pains means you gotta that's it. So the second half of the question was asking, do you do any activities post-report playback to action the insights further? So it's about that sort of distribution, getting them action, and what's the kind of motion afterwards, after distribution, after getting the insights out there?
Yeah, definitely. So depending on the circumstances, like I will often do a workshop afterward. If it felt like, hey, some of these insights are like a little bit like, freeform or not quite as like, this is exactly what needs to happen, but I will hold a workshop afterward where we start ideating and that type of thing. It's sometimes we'll do like matrices where we're like, okay, here are the things that we need to deal with right now versus later, just to help people start that prioritization conversation. But yeah, I think it really depends on the circumstances. But yes, there is definitely continuing conversations. I think sometimes like the way that I think about it too is like the readout is just like information sharing. We'll discuss it and that type of thing. And then workshops and all the things afterward are starting to make it like concrete as far as like, here's the action plan. Let's like actually talk about what we're going to do next.
Amazing. I think we have time for one more because I know we're kind of hitting up against the one or two more. So from Joyce, this is for Dovetail, sorry, I'm going to go for the Bret, from Leonard. So given that Notion primarily consumes their insights in readouts and docs and embedding highlight reels in those docs, can you share how you utilize the Dovetail homepage, feeds, and insight objects?
So we actually don't. I know that's going to be like a little bit spicy, but we bring Dovetail into Notion. That's like primarily how we're using it. That being said, we do have a lot of people who ask for access to Dovetail because they want to be watching all of those videos, and that's where they'll come across things like the feed and that sort of stuff. We're not super intentional about like what we're doing with it at this point, but we do like, hey, all stakeholders, et cetera, go into Dovetail. You can like absolutely watch everything and that type of thing.
Yeah, I think Dovetail, we realize that people, like every organization has to work in a different way. Like Notion is obviously very embedded in Notion and document culture, and some people have a deck culture. Some people like to do things in Miro. Everyone has like a different way of sort of presenting research and working in research. So I think it's like really important. That's why we work really hard on our integrations, so that like we're not like forcing people to come into Dovetail like if they don't need to, like, and if you prefer to work in your own tools, then it should all kind of link up seamlessly. And that's like a really strong viewpoint we've got here at Dovetail, and we're going to be introducing even more and more integrations to help out with that. Okay, I think we are at time, so I'm just going to do one more shout out to everybody, particularly Bret, for joining us. Thank you so much, Bret. It's like absolutely been an absolute pleasure. It'd be so nice speaking with you. The team from Tokyo, Notion, Noah, of course. I'm sorry that we couldn't get around to all your questions, but look, I want you all to stay in the loop for our next events because we've got some big things coming. So we're going to drop a sort of subscribe to our newsletter, the Outline newsletter, if you want to keep up to date with these events. I can drop that we have a big event coming next year, maybe in person, maybe in the United States. I don't know. You have to subscribe. You have to subscribe to find out. Stay in the loop. We also, if you want to try Dovetail or you want to speak to Noah about getting more understanding and information about the product, please do so. We'll drop some links in the chat there. And yes, you will get a recording. We will always send you a recording after the events. And until next time, I think that's going to be it, folks. Thank you very much for coming.